Good afternoon, everybody. I can barely see you. So I'll just kind of look out into the light. I'm going to come to you today in a spirit of openness and a spirit of unity, but also one of urgency. We're going to consider some pretty challenging information and ask some tough questions that I hope will give you a fresh perspective on our mission and a vision for the opportunities the pro-life movement has as we engage in our quickly down-spiraling culture. Against the backdrop of our culture, we know that the pro-life movement is a movement of local activism, one that seeks justice and one that provides hope. The pro-life movement is also a movement of diversity, one that's built on serving real human needs in multiple ways. Underneath all of the diverse factions of the pro-life movement in the political sphere, in our educational initiatives, and in frontline ministry, there lies a fundamental belief, an objective understanding about equal rights, the value of human life, and the injustice of abortion. From the time of the first century church, Christians in particular have had an objective understanding of the sanctity of human life. And it makes sense, I think, then, that for us to use this objective understanding as we measure how well we're protecting the sanctity of life in the 21st century. In other words, if our most basic truth is that every human being is made in the image of God and therefore has value and deserves to be equally protected under the law, then we need to use that truth as a measuring stick for how well we're doing. So what we're actually talking about here is something called personhood, and you've heard that word dropped a lot today so far, and you'll hear it more tonight at dinner for sure. So what is personhood exactly? So personhood is simply the right to have rights. That's the most basic definition. Personhood declares that all humans are human and that our equality depends on our humanness. It's based on our humanness. Nothing changes the scientific fact that we are biologically human from our very beginning, and therefore as humans we deserve equal protection under the law because we possess inherent natural rights granted by God, not government. Personhood means that the right to life applies without exception to every human being, regardless of developmental stage, manner of conception, biological traits, medical prognosis, perceived abilities, life situation, contribution to society, and even whether we are wanted by our own parents. Personhood acknowledges that human beings are made in the image of God and that God used a specific design on purpose that includes life, marriage, family, sexuality, and gender. It's all connected. What we're seeing everywhere in our culture today is a direct attack on the image of God, on the human person. And abortion is the most brutal, grotesque weapon waged against the most vulnerable. So, if we are going to effectively fight abortion, one of the greatest injustices in history, we need to understand whether or not our strategies are working, and if they're not, what we should be doing instead. So I want to start this discussion today by using what the pro-life and pro-abortion movements put forth as one of the key litmus tests, the Guttmacher Institute's Abortion Incidence and Service Availability Report. The latest report, published last fall, looked at abortion in America from 2014 to 2017. We've probably all seen the numbers, but the really big news was that the abortion rate in 2017 was the lowest that's ever been recorded since legalized abortion was mandated by the US Supreme Court in 1973. Now, yes, that is certainly something to celebrate. Pro-life organizations pointed to the impact of state-level abortion restrictions and the public's increasing shift towards life as the reason for this decline. Pro-abortion organizations claimed increased use of birth control was the major factor. So who is right? If we want to be effective, we need to start asking these kinds of questions. I think it's important that we do. Because how we approach abortion from both political and educational standpoints directly affects our ability to address all other assaults on human life and human dignity, current ones and future ones. So what we do here really matters. So we're going to look beyond the headlines in the next several minutes to answer 4 questions as we can consider the effectiveness of our educational and political strategies. Number 1, what's actually behind this decline? Number 2, are we shifting the culture toward life? Number 3, what trends are happening and what are we doing to address them? And number 4, are we educating effectively? So let's answer our first question. What's actually behind the decline in abortion rates? In its 2017 report, Guttmacher makes 2 very bold claims that actually fly in the face of most of the pro-abortion arguments that we hear. The first claim is that there is no clear pattern linking abortion restrictions to changes in the abortion rate. In other words, laws aren't the cause. Now that's a bold statement, right? So when I dug a little deeper, what I found that almost 60% of the national declines in abortion over the past 3 Guttmacher reports, so since 2008, happened in the 18 states and DC that did not pass new abortion restrictions. And some states like California and New York, who actually took steps to increase abortion, their rates fell too, as did several states with newly passed restrictions like Mississippi. They actually had abortion rate increases. So that's interesting, I think, when you start to look at what the data are showing. Now, Guttmacher's second claim was that there is no clear link from abortion restrictions to clinic closures to abortion rates. Now, here I found that among the 26 states and DC that lost abortion facilities between 2011 and 2017, 24 of them saw declines in their abortion rates. Well, that makes sense, right? Less abortion facilities, less abortion. However, 13 of the 15 states that added facilities saw declines in their abortion rates, as did 8 of the 9 states where the number of clinics stayed the same. So Guttmacher is right here. There is no clear link or pattern to this. Well, it goes without saying, of course, that any time a facility that kills preborn children closes, that's something that we need to celebrate, right? But we have to consider Planned Parenthood's marketing strategy. So I live in Minnesota, and the percentage of abortions performed at our St. Paul mega Planned Parenthood have drastically increased from 35% of abortions in Minnesota in 2010 to 63% in 2018. And this is a trend that's going to continue as Planned Parenthood goes across the country, edging out smaller independent facilities. So if abortion restrictions and clinic closures can't account for these declines, what in the world is going on? We need to know. So this is the big question. Is this the result of birth control? Well, a 6-year study published in the Contraception Journal in 2016 found no significant change in the proportion of women who used birth control, even among the highest risk for unintended pregnancy. 51% said they were using birth control in the month that they got pregnant. Even Guttmacher has acknowledged this very stable trend over the last 20 years of its reporting. So what about society's view of children? 2 of the 3 indicators that the National Center for Health Statistics uses to measure fertility rates show that U.S. fertility is at a record low. The number of births and the birth rate continue to drop. So of course, we would expect abortion rates to drop. Shockingly, the average number of children born per woman dropped from 3.2 in 1973 to 1.8 in 2018. The US population has been under replacement value for the last 10 years. This has been especially devastating in the Black community, whose children are a target of the abortion industry. So what about the stigma of abortion? Is this having an impact on the rates? Well, pro-abortion movements sure knows about stigma. It's a real threat to them. They've spent years and billions of dollars trying to normalize abortion in our culture, but more men and women are sharing their stories of abortion regret, and the number of post-abortive healing ministries are increasing. Could it be that the devastation that people have been sharing in their own families since the 1970s and more recently on social media is actually having an impact on the abortion rates over time? The acute rise of social media certainly is having a negative impact on human relationships, and we can see this in the general social survey. People are having less sexual intercourse. Now, this is good outside of marriage, right? But marriage is being postponed and even rejected by the millennial generation, and our culture's addiction to pornography also plays a key role in the damage being done to real human relationships, to human connection, to marriage, and to family. Are more people rejecting abortion and becoming pro-life? This is the million-dollar question that we all want answered, right? Well, public opinion on abortion has remained surprisingly stable over time, split fairly evenly between pro-life and pro-choice, even favoring the pro-choice label as evidenced by many different pollsters. Even after the Gosnell trial, the Planned Parenthood videos, the Hellerstedt Supreme Court case that further embedded the right to abortion, and the passage of New York's Reproductive Health Act, no more than 1% of the population in the last 5 years has told Gallup that abortion is the most important issue facing America. Which leads us to ask our next question. Are we shifting the culture toward life? It's important for us to look beyond the pro-life and pro-choice labels when it comes to Americans' viewpoints on abortion. Gallup and Pew Research and the National Opinion Research Center help us do that, but their polls uncover a very disturbing reality. 61% of adults say that abortion should be legal in all or most circumstances, compared to 38% who say it should be illegal in all or most circumstances. Of adults under 30, 70% say abortion should be legal in all or most circumstances. But there's something even more disturbing, if you can imagine, coming out of the General Social Survey. So since 1977, 40% of adults 18 to 34 have consistently said that a woman should be able to get a legal abortion for any reason at all. So pro-life education makes it very clear that life begins at fertilization and that abortion at any stage kills a unique individual human being. If this were having any impact at all on public opinion, we would see a decline in the positive answers to this question. But we don't. Since 1977. What's more, when we do look at pro-life and pro-choice labels, the percentage of adults under 30 who claim to be pro-life has plummeted almost 20 points just in the last 2 years. A 2017 report pulled together many different polls over multiple decades and summed it up this way. Although opinion about abortion is stable, it is also deeply ambivalent. Americans are simultaneously pro-life and pro-choice. Substantial numbers of people tell the pollsters that abortion is an act of murder. They also say the decision to have an abortion should be a personal choice. These two views are fundamentally contradictory, yet many Americans hold them simultaneously. They see no reason to resolve the tensions in their own positions. In other words, moral relativity guides Americans' viewpoints of abortion, not science, not consistent values, not that objective understanding of the equal right to life. Instead, American support for abortion depends heavily on the reason and the trimester. This specific chart, I think, speaks for itself. 70% of Americans polled say we should kill children conceived in rape and incest in the first trimester. 67% say we should kill a child who would be born with a life-threatening illness. What does that even mean? 56% say we should kill a child with a mental disability. Almost half of participants agree that a woman should be able to get a legal abortion for any reason at all in the first trimester. So I want to add some context to this. The most recent Marist poll revealed that 75% of Americans want abortion limited to, at most, the first trimester. 6 in 10 agreed that it should be restricted after 20 weeks, except for the wildly misunderstood life of the mother exception. Upon the release of this Marist poll, every major conservative news outlet and almost all national pro-life organizations celebrated it. The March for Life Action called the results the American consensus on abortion. Why in the world would we celebrate this as a measure of our success? Let me show you what I mean. Abortions in the first trimester, where 75% of Americans want them to remain legal, is rising steadily. Chemical abortions by the abortion pill make up 39% of all abortions performed. Of all abortions performed, 88%, almost 9 out of 10, happen in the first trimester. Of these first trimester abortions, about half of them are done by the abortion pill. Why would we celebrate that 3/4 of Americans want 88% of abortions to remain legal, especially when abortions are being increasingly concentrated in the first trimester? And that leads us to our next tough question. What trends are happening, and what are we doing to address them? First trimester abortions will continue to increase for several reasons, and I want you to hear me on this. All of these reasons are a direct response to laws put forth to restrict and regulate abortion. Pro-abortion organizations use these laws as marketing tools to incite a panic about a post-Roe America, and they push legislators to enshrine abortion into law because abortion is not enshrined into law. It was a Supreme Court case. Blue courts in red states are now using lawsuits against abortion restrictions to find a right to abortion in state constitutions. In other words, our efforts to chip around the edges of abortion are having the opposite effect. This is so critical for us to understand. Here's what's happening on the ground. The abortion industry has been working to expand telemedicine, that's webcam abortions, for wider distribution of the abortion pill for about 2 decades. More and more pharmaceutical companies now are making the abortion pill available illegally online as part of a new push for something called self-managed abortions. In its report, Guttmacher actually admitted that the abortion decline that they reported that we're all celebrating could be considerably less because of the inability to adequately track self-managed abortions. 12% of abortion facilities across the country reported that they treated women for complications from self-managed abortions. This was as high as 21% of facilities in the South. There are now websites, legal firms, well-funded social campaigns, and entire books dedicated to instructing women in self-managed abortions. Efforts are already underway by abortion activists, the ACLU, the American Medical Association, and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists to lift FDA restrictions on selling the abortion pill at pharmacies, online, and through the mail. This will become over-the-counter, just like Plan B. They're using the exact same strategies to pull it off. We need to understand in this context that clinic closures won't matter. Laws that target the width of hallways won't matter. 24-hour waiting periods and ultrasound requirements, they're not going to matter. Forcing abortionists to have admitting privileges at local hospitals isn't going to matter. Dismemberment bans, pain-capable bills, even heartbeat bills won't matter because women and girls will abort their children in private. So what is the pro-life movement doing to address this trend? Unfortunately, the answer is nothing at all. This chart, I think, is a very, very sobering reminder of what our politicians and many national and state level pro-life organizations continue to focus on, and that's restrictions based on procedure or some point after human life has already begun. We're even outside the pie now, not even talking about abortion. We need to understand that the national pro-life movement, and in a lot of cases, the state-level organizations are actively working against efforts to declare the legal personhood of preborn children. I'm sad to report to you that just a few weeks ago, Jim Bopp, the general counsel for the National Right to Life, flew to Wisconsin to testify against Wisconsin's personhood amendment. He did the same thing this summer in Tennessee for a personhood bill there. The answer is always the same. It's not time yet. We have to wait. It's been 50 years. Shouldn't we be further along? If we are going to effectively fight abortion, we need to understand whether or not our strategies are working, and if they're not, what we should be doing instead. Laws are very powerful teachers. Shouldn't every single one we put forth reflect what we want to teach? That humans are human from their earliest biological beginning and therefore deserve equal protection under the law. Let's have this discussion in our movement. Which brings me to our last question. Are we educating effectively? Our political strategies have a direct impact on our educational efforts, and almost all laws that attempt to restrict abortion explicitly spell out a right to abortion right in the text. You can kill him if he's younger than this, if he doesn't feel pain yet, when he has a disability, or when he's conceived in rape. Doesn't this send an inconsistent message to America about what the pro-life movement truly believes? If we want to make abortion illegal and unthinkable. Why would we actively contribute to the moral relativism that's reflected in all of those polls that we just saw? I want to give you an example. When the news about a bill that attempts to regulate abortion facilities hits the media, the abortion advocates just absolutely lose their mind. This isn't about women's health care. This isn't about women's safety. This is about denying access to abortion. Well, yeah. I mean, isn't that the point, right? They say it like they've exposed some big secret, except to them and to the general public, they have. Think about that. Is this an effective way to educate people on the equal rights of all human beings and the brutal injustice of abortion? It's what we've been doing for almost 50 years. Here's another question. Should our educational efforts even be targeting the general public, or is there a more effective way to change hearts and minds? We hear stories of babies saved through the efforts of sidewalk counselors. They often involve literature that opened people's eyes for the very first time to human development. Pregnancy help centers across the country consistently reveal that clients react to the sight of their baby on the ultrasound with these words: "I had no idea." We're simply not reaching people in the culture until they contend with abortion personally. And those we are reaching, we're confusing with compromised politics. Videos of pro-life conversion stories on college campuses consistently show people who say, "I never thought about it that way before now." So those videos are shared like hundreds of thousands of times. So that's a huge victory for the pro-life movement. But once the cameras stop rolling, who is discipling those young people? Who is walking beside them to help them stay consistent? The biggest educational challenge the pro-life movement faces is a public that desperately needs truth, but doesn't want it, doesn't care, won't make a personal investment, or is simply unwilling to address their cognitive dissonance. Abortion is murder, and it's a personal choice. For the last 50 years, the pro-life movement has assumed that if you educate the general public on pregnancy and abortion, fewer women will have abortions. But if we've seen that there's simply no evidence to tie the educational efforts directly to the declines in abortion over the long term. However, here's the happy part. There is a happy part. New evidence is showing us that we absolutely can move the dial when we focus narrowly on the abortion vulnerable at the local level, where the pro-life movement has always had and will always have the most impact. So I want to look at pregnancy help in particular. This chart puts two very important national trends side by side. The blue line shows the increase in pregnancy help centers since 1973, and the red line shows the decrease in abortion ratios over the same time period. Now, abortion ratios measure the proportion of abortions to live births. In other words, ratios tell us whether or not more pregnant women are rejecting abortion and giving birth. So according to the CDC, abortion ratios at the national level have fallen almost 50% since their peak in 1984. But keep in mind that just like declines in numbers and rates, we can't credit abortion restrictions, birth control, educating the public, or anything else I've mentioned. But we can, and we should, start to look at local efforts in local communities and how they're having an impact. So what's happening in pregnancy help? Vision for Life Pittsburgh is an organization that helps raise public awareness of pregnancy help centers through targeted advertising to abortion vulnerable women. Their research is showing some very encouraging things. Since 2010, when Vision for Life began advertising local pregnancy help centers and abortion pill reversal in Allegheny County, this is an area that includes Pittsburgh, abortion numbers have fallen dramatically to the lowest ever in the county. Abortion ratios fell in Pennsylvania by 15% between 2010 and 2018, but in Allegheny County, where advertising was targeted, abortion ratios declined by 26% among residents. And first-time abortions are decreasing faster than repeat abortions. And what that means is the entire abortion industry in Pittsburgh is in decline. Vision for Life estimates the abortion industry in Pittsburgh has lost nearly $4 million since they started targeting abortion vulnerable women with advertising in Allegheny County in 2010. That is a defunding strategy. When more women know about pregnancy help centers in their local community, more of them do not abort their children. This doesn't mean that every woman who saw an advertisement and didn't abort became a client of a pregnancy help center, but it does mean that a seed was planted that challenged her view and reached her at a vulnerable time of her life. Targeted abortion pill reversal and pregnancy help center advertising is an educational strategy that we should test throughout the country. Pregnancy help, sidewalk counseling, and other frontline ministries are the work of the church. This is you and I. We're the ones that need to be out there being the hands and feet of Jesus. Throughout history, Christian charity, sacrifice, and witness have ended the greatest injustices in history. This is our time now. But what about Christians? Are we educating people within the walls of our own churches and parishes about what it means to be consistently pro-life? Are we helping them see the pro-life movement as a cause for only some, or a biblical mandate for every single believer? Unfortunately, the church is in a desperate state. 20% of white evangelicals say abortion should be legal in all or most circumstances. White mainline Protestant, 60%. Black Protestant, 64%. Catholic, 56%. When we look at official statements on abortion, we find that the Catholic Church is the only entity that opposes abortion in all circumstances, yet over half of Catholics say it should be legal in all or most circumstances. Protestant denominations either allow exceptions or they openly promote abortion as a social good. According to Guttmacher, self-identified Christians make up 54% of all abortions every year. Our churches are filled with post-abortive people, and they're filled with leaders who do not know how to address abortion, or they're afraid to address it, or they are involved in abortion themselves. This is especially devastating in the Black community. The pastor was a very successful target of Margaret Sanger's eugenic plan, and he still is today for Planned Parenthood. So let's see what post-abortive women have to say about the church. In a 2015 Lifeway study, which you probably are all familiar with, researchers found that 76% of women who had an abortion said the local church had no influence on her decision. Of that number, over half were attending their church at least once a month. 14% of women who had an abortion said their church paid for, actively encouraged, or referred them for an abortion. Only 5% were referred to a pregnancy help center by their church. When asked about the reaction they received or expected to receive from their church about their decision to abort, the most common reactions women reported were judgmental, condemning, and no reaction at all. Apathy. How often they attended the church had very little impact on their answers. A few weeks ago, I was texting with a sidewalk counselor who attends my church as we were trying to save twins from abortion, and I asked her why she sacrifices her time every week going out to the very places that babies are killed, and I want to share with you what she said to me. Because I need to be there saying this is wrong, regardless of the outcome. I need to mourn and love the babies since no one else there will. And every now and then, somebody changes their mind. It's draining. It's hard because not a lot of people truly understand the pressure and the spiritual warfare that's going on. And it makes me sad how few come out to pray when you consider how many churches there are. It makes me angry that thousands of people like her, sidewalk counselors across the country, have to go out there at all. Why is abortion still legal in America? It's because the church has permitted it. Ladies and gentlemen, yes. Yes. It is our job as Christians to set the standard to uncompromisingly end legal abortion and be the solution that makes abortion unthinkable. Why is that? Because abortion is a sin, and sin is a gospel issue, and the gospel is the mission of the church. If it is not wrong to kill defenseless little boys and girls in their mother's wombs, then nothing is wrong. And if nothing is wrong, then we have no need for repentance or forgiveness. And if we have no need for repentance or forgiveness, then we have no need for the cross. Thank you. So how do we respond as the church? What do we do? We must educate the church on being consistently pro-life and in what it means to love mercy, act justly, and walk humbly in the pro-life movement. Christians must see that abortion is our Holocaust, that life is not a cause among many others, but the cause that underlies all the others. We must also focus our educational efforts on the local community to reach abortion-vulnerable and abortion-determined women and men right where they are. And we must demand that our elected representatives stop restricting and regulating abortion, stop sacrificing human lives for political gain, and stop bowing to the courts who do not make law. We can't play politics with our principles, just like we can't play politics with our churches. If we are going to effectively fight abortion, we need to understand whether or not our strategies are working, and if they are not, what we should be doing instead. And I'll leave you with this. If we cannot unite at present to say that every single human being is a person that deserves equal protection without exception, and then apply that fundamental principle consistently in everything we do, then we are wholly unprepared for what's coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your response. I'm moved. Wow. Well, first question is very practical. How can we find all this information on your research? Is it available?
Yes, that's.
If not, you can buy all the pictures I took of her slides. I have them.
I actually wrote a research article on this, and if you go to personhood.org and you scroll down right on the homepage, it says see our Guttmacher analysis. I think that's what the button says, but it's right on the homepage, and a lot of this is here.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, this one's a little different. If they fear-mongered about women who died in back alley abortions, why are the pro-abortion people pushing women to have self-managed abortions today?
It's a great question. The answer is that the back alley wasn't really ever the back alley. The back alley abortion before it was legal was done by professionals. It was done by doctors and nurses, trained people. And so when it became legal overnight, it just went out into the street. And back alley kind of became Main Street. So
the coat hanger thing is a myth?
Yeah, I mean, sure, there were a couple that were that. I've seen pictures of them. I've seen horrible accounts of women who self-aborted, but they're shifting now sort of back to where it was because they're afraid with everything that's being done. They're afraid that if Roe gets overturned, it would be returned to the states, and then what would happen to women in states that weren't abortion friendly, essentially. And so they're trying to prepare for that, stocking up on all kinds of things, contraception, different things. But yeah, so they're actively promoting that now, and it's very dangerous. There was something I saw a couple weeks ago from Women on Waves. I don't know if anybody here knows who they are. They're an international organization that does abortion in shipping containers in international waters outside of countries where abortions are illegal. And they just released a paper on how to do a self-managed abortion with the abortion pill in second and third trimesters.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so we posted it on our Facebook page. We're at Facebook at Personhood Alliance, and the paper's right there. If you want to scroll through and find the post, it's really shocking. They're coaching women to do this for late-term abortions. It's awful.
Yeah. Maybe you can help me on that. I just read recently that there are more women who die in our safe and legal abortions than they did in the quote-unquote coat hanger days.
Right. So I believe it was 1972, the year before Roe was handed down, that 39 women died from illegal abortions. And Roe wasn't the cause, by the way, of the decline in deaths from abortion. It was the use of penicillin in the 1940s. So there were a lot less infections. And so if you look at the chart of abortion deaths, you'll see a big, huge dive, and then you'll see Roe kind of at the bottom. So the narrative that Roe had anything to do with making abortion safer is just not true.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think you just touched on part of this, but what would you see happening if and when R v. Wade is struck down?
Well,
what is the enemy? Or you started to say the enemy is already doing something?
Well, if Roe v. Wade is struck down, it would simply just go to the states. And I don't think we want that. Because California will still abort lots of children, and New York will still abort lots of children. I think personhood is the answer. Because if you declare that the unborn child is a person with legal rights, that they are equally protected under the law, then you don't need to say anything else. You don't need to restrict it. You don't need to regulate it. You don't need to worry about what state's doing what. You go right down to the core, to the heart of the abortion matter. And by the way, not just abortion, but all assaults on human life and human dignity. The personhood undoes all of that.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm encouraged when I look out here and see so many men, because I spoke at a banquet recently where they had a man share a testimony of the 300 banquets I've been to. It's the only one where I have seen a man come up and say, I was personally responsible for pushing my girlfriend into that.
Right.
And so the question along that lines is, any suggestions for getting men more involved, or what strategies to get men involved in pregnancy center work?
Oh, wow. I think, well, pregnancy center work is the work of the church. Like I said that before. I think that men need to lead on this. I think that men should be out there. Men should be out sidewalk counseling. They should be praying at the abortion facilities. When I pray at abortion facilities and men are there, men speak to other men. Women can't speak to other men like men can speak to other men. And I've seen it happen. I've seen so many times where a man will reach out to a man who's out smoking a cigarette or waiting for his girlfriend who's in the abortion mill, and he will go in and get her. Now, not every time does she come out, but he will go in and get her because he's there. He's confused. He doesn't think it's his voice. He doesn't, there's just, he doesn't know what to do. He's just kind of there. He's got to give her a ride. He's got to pay for it, whatever. He's ambivalent. So we have to help them stand up, and men can do that. Men can do that in mentorship programs at PRCs. They can do that through church programs when a church will bring a post-abortive woman, post-abortive men into the congregation, when they help women who choose life at a pregnancy resource center. Often a church will then provide material things for them, provide spiritual witness for them. Men need to be there to do that. That's missing, I think, in a lot of churches right now.
Amen. This one's a little more constitutional. R.V. Wade said that unborn children are not legal persons, while corporations can be legal persons. How can we get an amendment to the Constitution, even the Ohio Constitution?
Right.
I'm trying to read this, to name the unborn as legal persons.
Yeah, so there was an effort to do a human life amendment. It actually had a lot of traction early on in the pro-life movement, and then the exceptions came. And the pro-life movement split, and a number of people went to the restricting and the regulating and the exceptions, and there were people who were still trying to do the constitutional amendment. That is something I think we should do and we can do. It's a very, very long and hard fight, but I think it needs to happen at the state level too, and it's what Wisconsin is doing. It's what a number of states are trying to do, in fact, ahead of what's happening with the blue courts in the red states, who are coming in and trying to get their Supreme Courts in their states to declare a right to abortion in the Constitution. So it's a proactive measure. It needs to be. So I think it's something that can be done at both levels.
Excellent, excellent. Can you speak about Can you speak about the abortion reversal pill? Would more knowledge about this be helpful? We really don't hear much. We don't hear much.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, I don't have the figures in front of me, but when I was talking to the executive director of Vision for Life Pittsburgh, who the research came from, he was talking about how many people, one of the things they do in their advertising is they target APR in particular, and they have a call button on their Facebook advertisement that connects women to the help center line that APR has. And the increase in that, since they started doing a little bit more about abortion pill reversal, what it is, that it works, that it's safe, has just skyrocketed. So when you put that information, again, at the hands of that woman who is vulnerable, and you educate her about what's possible, she can click a button and then talk to somebody or chat with somebody. That's very powerful, and that's a really good use of technology. All the times we talk about how horrible technology is become in our society, that definitely, I think, is a really good use of technology.
Excellent. Great questions. And this is the last one we have, and we're still ahead of time, so praise God. So there's a correlation between the number of pregnancy centers and a decline in abortions, that there's a ratio. Mm-hmm. But what shows that there is this causation? I'm not quite sure. Is there a causation between the two? In those communities where you have declining abortion centers, how do we know there are not other factors where abortions are going down?
Right, and I think that's a great question, which is why I looked into what Pittsburgh was doing, because I had that same question. How can we hook the two together? Sure, there's two lines, but causation is very important. And what their research is showing is that we need to do more research into this. If we can start to repeat this across the country, particularly in urban areas, because those are the places that abortions don't go down, right? There, you have colleges, you have an urban area. So in this case in Pittsburgh, they saw just such a dramatic drop in abortions because of the advertising. And I'm sure there are other factors, there always are, but let's start to repeat this. Let's use this, again, as an educational strategy across the country. Let's see what happens when we put information directly in the hands of the abortion vulnerable woman. And let's spend our time and our energy and our efforts and our money on that, because that's that direct human connection that needs to happen to change hearts and minds. It's not going to happen from a national level. It's just not, because that's not where the church is. The church is the work, the hands and feet, the relationships.
Fantastic. So thank you again for your support here, and let's show our appreciation to Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.